In this video, I'm making use of 3 Mr. Beer brewing kits I received from my brother. I also don't have the Mr. Beer equipment, so I'm going to have to improvise and use my own brewing equipment. Mr. Beer is arguably the easiest way to make beer. It's a no-boil instant beer. Each kit is designed to make 2 gallons of beer. My equipment is designed to make 5 gallons at a time. So instead of making these as separate 2-gallon batches, I'm going to make a Frankenstein beer using all 3 combined. I'm also going to dial back the final quantity from 6 gallons to 5 gallons. This should hopefully bring the potential alcohol level up from 4.6% to 5.16%. Kits generally come with cans of hopped malt extract, which means all the hop additions as well as the mashing of the grain into sugars has been done for you and concentrated into a single can of syrup called HME for short. The 3 kits I have are St. Patrick's Irish Stout with Booster. The booster is mostly corn sugar that is nearly 100% fermentable and will boost alcohol, Oktoberfest Vienna Lager with mellow amber, and American Blonde Ale with pale export. Here is the contents of the boxes, less the cleaners. They come with a small packet of dry yeast. What's misguided about these kits is that the yeast is universal. The Stout and Blonde are both ales, which use top fermenting yeast, and the Oktoberfest is a lager, which uses bottom fermenting yeast. Typically the instructions will tell you that the fermentation takes place in a dark, cool place, which is really only suitable for ale styles. So my guess is the yeast is a top fermenting ale yeast. The first thing I did was fill a basin of hot water. I used a basin instead of my sink because I'm going to need to move it when I'm ready to open the cans of HME. It is also important to know that everything that will be coming into contact with the HME has been or will be sanitized thoroughly. I then let the cans of HME soak in the hot water. This softens up the syrup, which makes them easier to handle and pour. It is important to note that I removed the plastic covers from the cans before I put them in the water, because under the plastic covers is where the dry yeast is stored. I then filled a medium-sized pot half full of water. I put the pot on the stove and set it to high to get it boiling. While the water was boiling, I prepared the dry yeast. I collected about a cup of warm water. I was looking for a temperature between 90 and 100 degrees. The thermometer was sanitized before use. With a pair of sanitized scissors, I opened the yeast and poured them into the water. I then covered the yeast using a sanitized piece of aluminum foil and let it rest. By this time my water was boiling. Add the booster and stir slowly until it's fully dissolved and bring back to a boil and let it boil for 10 minutes. There is no need to sanitize at this point as the boil is a kill step and will sanitize for us. Now it's time to combine the ingredients. I'm using a sanitized 6.5 gallon fermentation bucket. I have a basin of hot water with the cans of HME, a second empty basin for trash, a sanitized plate, a sanitized can opener, and a sanitized spatula. Before opening each can, I sprayed them with a liberal amount of sanitizer. I poured out the contents and then scooped out as much as I could with the spatula. Use care when emptying the cans, as the HME is very sticky. At this point, I added the dissolved booster mixture. I didn't want to add this first because I didn't want to put boiling liquid in an empty bucket. I then sanitized my metal spatula and stirred up the entire mixture. At this point, I topped off the bucket with cold water until I reached about 5 gallons. When pouring, I made sure to pour from high up and as fast as possible. This helps to aerate the mixture, which is now called wort. Once topped off to a little over 5 gallons, I used a sanitized spoon and I gave the wort one final stir. Using a device called a beer thief, which has been sanitized, I gathered a sample of wort to get an original gravity. I checked the temperature of the sample to make sure it was cool enough to pitch my yeast, ideally below 70 degrees. At 58.5 degrees, it's a little colder than I'd prefer, but it will do. The yeast may be a little sluggish starting off, if they work at all. Now it's time to pitch the yeast. With a sanitized spoon, I gave the yeast mixture a quick stir and then pitched it. Pitching is the beer terminology for pouring the yeast into the wort. I attached my sanitized lid to the top of the bucket, and then sanitized the airlock hole as well. Finally, I installed my sanitized airlock. At this point, the bucket will be moved into a cool, dark space, namely my temperature-controlled fermentation chamber. Last but not least, it's time to take a gravity reading. I drop in my hydrometer and give it a spin to shake off any bubbles. Looks to me like 1.051. To hit my estimate of 5.16% alcohol by volume, my final gravity will need to be close to 1.012. Stay tuned for follow-up videos where I check fermentation, take gravity readings, and have a final taste test. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe.